Welcome to the One Stiletto in the Grave podcast with your hosts, Sonny Ormond and Jane James.
Well, hello everyone. We have a joyous episode for you today. We are talking about how the Archers led to love, romance and marriage with a little nod to Hawaiian shirts and hot cross buns. Janie and I are delighted to have as our guests today the sensational and inspirational Mary and Nigel Long. Are you ready to cast off those dull old blacks and greys and embrace colour? Kettlewell sells high-quality wardrobe essentials in more than 300 colours. From everyday basics to jackets, skirts, dresses and scarves, each Kettlewell style comes in a range of colours in 4 seasonal palettes, so you can choose the exact shade for your skin tone. And when you wear your perfect shade, your skin looks fresh, glowing and youthful. We're ready to embrace the rainbow. Are you? Visit Kettlewell at www.kettlewellcolours.co.uk.
Welcome everyone to today's episode in which we'll be thinking about weddings. Well, of course, there are grand plans in place for Tracy and Jazz's wedding in The Archers.
Yes, there are, and I really hope that the scriptwriters allow them a long and happy marriage. But of course, you never know in The Archers, do you? But they're such a lovely couple, and it's brilliant that people in the village are helping them out. I think Jalene's lending Tracy a dress, and Susan's going to alter it for her,
I think so, and in fact, she might even get to keep the dress, who knows?
Yes.
I think Clary's doing the flowers, and then the last I heard, they were having the reception at the Bull, and Jolene was going to give them mates' rates.
Yes, that's right. Now, speaking of marriage, some of you lovely listeners out there will know that we recently did a live recording on the topic of friendship at the Academic Archers Conference. That's episode 3, if you haven't heard it yet and you want to find it. And in the process, we came across the extraordinary story of Mary and Nigel Long.
So Mary and Nigel met online and went from chat room to honeymoon. Well, let's let them tell the story. Hello, Mary and Nigel.
Hello.
Hello.
So Mary, now you met online as part of an Archers fan group. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Yes, I had lived alone for 13 years and I'd always, every night, listened to the Archers and then stumbled across a Facebook group, an Archers fan-based Facebook group, and decided to join it just so I could chat about it with like-minded people. And it was almost straight away, it was about Easter time, that I stumbled across a post that Nigel had put up, and I think it was a pretty sort of off-topic post really, and might not have been approved of, but he posted some pictures of some hot cross buns. And he was quite proud of them. But to me, they looked as if they belonged in the rockery rather than in our mouths. So I was a bit naughty and said, well, they look as if they'd be better placed in the rockery. And from that moment, our banter started. We've got to remember there were 7,000 members of the group at the time, and I stumbled across this random post of some hot cross buns.
Oh, so this all started, Nigel, with Mary being very rude about your hot cross buns.
Yes, actually they did taste quite good, I'll have you know. But yeah, they kind of were slightly misshapen. But yeah, that was my mother's recipe, and she was a big Archers fan, so that was very appropriate, really, I think. But yeah, she was very rude, and I don't know why I even replied. But,
and we've continued. The trouble is, the banter began then, and we've continued to be rude to each other ever since. And then what happened next really was, because we wanted, or a lot of us like-minded people wanted to talk about other things as well, to develop friendship, that about 100 of us cleared off really to set another site up, another group up, where we all started talking about the Archers and other things. So every night we are called, just before 7, we call a register and we all talk about the episode, and in great minute detail. And also we talk about other things. And during the initial setup, we were all talking about what we did for a living or what we had done for a living, because many of the group are retired. And I work in flood risk management, specialising in what you can do at a property level to keep the flood water out and help a property recover after a flood. And I've gone into this world on the back of being flooded myself. And then Nigel said he was a graphic designer. And a very talented one too, I have to tell you. And I was actually looking for a graphic designer at the time. So we planned to meet. Nigel lived in Winchester, and I was going to visit my then mother, my late mother, in Bognor Regis, and stopped off en route. We met in a Costa Coffee in sort of just off the M3. And Nigel rocked up wearing the most horrendous Hawaiian shirt.
Nigel, did you?
Which again I was very rude about. And we initially started talking about my design and what I wanted, and Nigel completely grasped that, but we didn't leave for several hours. We just couldn't stop talking. And I think our relationship began from that, really, didn't it?
Yeah, well, you couldn't stop talking. I didn't actually like to interrupt. So.
That is so not true.
I love this. I love this. Being rude about your hot cross buns and your Hawaiian shirt. You still hung in there, though, Nigel.
I'm hanging on in there, and she was hanging on in there because it was going to be cheaper for you to marry me than.
So this is lovely. So when did you realise then that this friendship was turning to love?
Well, I think really I asked because I was so impressed with Nigel's sort of design skills, and I was planning on writing a book which involved travelling around the whole country interviewing people that had been flooded but had made their homes flood resilient or flood recoverable, and I needed a photographer and I needed someone to design the book for me. And so I asked Nigel if he'd travel round with me, and we were on the road for several weeks, and we spent all the time working together, and then evenings together, and we walked together, and we just realised that something pretty special was happening.
Yeah, it was lovely, wasn't it, Beth?
Yeah.
We worked well together.
And the book was a huge success, but then we became a couple. But I think the thing that made us was Nigel was taken a little bit ill with man flu just before COVID. It wasn't COVID, but he was extremely ill.
It was much worse, I think.
Much worse than anything. He told me it was worse than childbirth.
Which of course you would know all about.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So I volunteered. I said, look, I think we're going to go into some kind of lockdown. And I volunteered to go and stay with him, I said, for a couple of weeks until it's all over. And I ended up staying with him for 8 months.
Yeah,
Really?
I couldn't get rid of her. I had to sell the house in the end, didn't I?
You are so rude. You see, rudeness is the foundation of our relationship.
But actually, the lockdown patch was actually quite fantastic, wasn't it? Because both our work dropped off, like off a cliff, really. I did advertising for Brittany Ferries, so obviously they stopped sailing, and so there's no advertising needed. I'm freelance. So we had all this sort of time, and the weather was perfect, wasn't it? And we borrowed a neighbour's dog to walk.
So we walked miles, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a huge dog. And we just loved it, didn't we? Loved, working very kind of intensely for years. Suddenly, when your work's taken away from you, it's like there was a sort of freedom we found, wasn't there? And
we did things like eat cheese and biscuits at lunchtime and drink vast quantities of port, and and just go for such long walks. And we decided during that time that we were forever. We we were
Yeah.
going to end up together. So we decided during that time to decorate Nigel's house and have it ready to put on the market once lockdown was over. And the reason we decided to sort of move to my area was that Nigel's got 2 adult sons, and they're unmarried and live at different parts of the country, one in London, one in York. And my family are all concentrated in Worcester, where I lived. And I had a profoundly disabled autistic son who is 26 years old with the mental capacity of a toddler. And he also has severe epilepsy and is forever being taken ill. So we needed to be somewhere near where he was, and obviously near my lovely grandchildren, who absolutely adore Naughty Nigel, as they call him. So we made the move to my area after Nigel sold his house.
So did one of you propose to the other, or was it?
Well,
just-
well, that came about in a sort of a very unusual way. So we basically moved in together up here in Herefordshire, and that year, in July, my son, who was only 26, suffered a stroke. He was in York, and he was rushed to York Hospital. I rushed up there.
And I couldn't initially, because I just had a brand new grandson born with a serious heart defect. And it was touch and go. He had to have life-saving surgery at only 11 days old. And I was looking after my granddaughter.
And he was in Birmingham Hospital.
He was in Birmingham Hospital, and I was looking after his big sister. And then we realised very quickly that Mike was taking a severe turn for the worst. Nigel had a call. We were together then because they wouldn't let him go instantly due to COVID restraints. And we'd had a call to say that Mike was being put on a ventilator, and did we want to say goodnight to him? And you can imagine that was right at the end of COVID, when we knew that saying goodnight to people on ventilators meant goodbye. And that was...
It was very traumatic.
It was terrible.
And so I rushed up to York, and on the way up to York I was told he was being moved to Newcastle. There's a cardiac hospital there because he was deteriorating. So I basically was chasing ambulances really. I saw him in York just before he left, but and then I had to go up to Newcastle, and Mary decided you arranged
yes, I managed to offload my granddaughter
Yeah.
and jumped on a train to be with Nigel.
to come and join me. So he was rushed up to Newcastle Freeman Hospital, and we went up there. I was the only one allowed to see him because of COVID, and I went in, and he was taken off the ventilator because they'd stabilised him, and I decided that he needed something to fight for really, and so I suggested to him that if I proposed to Mary, would he be best man? And he couldn't speak, but he looked quite alarmed, which I think was a yes. So well, he couldn't really speak because of the ventilator, but he seemed very pleased about that. So that was my plan. That was give him something to fight for.
The trouble is, I think I'll take over now because it's quite emotional for Nigel, but Mike deteriorated absolutely rapidly, and Nigel kept being taken into the quiet room to be told, that basically Mike's life was hanging by a thread. And one night in particular, we were in a hotel very near to the hospital, and there was a wedding reception going on underneath our room, and it was very loud, and into the small hours we were listening to sort of Queen, We Will Rock You and things like that, and the telephone went to say that they were beginning to lose Mike, and if they didn't put him on a mechanical heart bypass there and then, he wouldn't live. And we knew we were going to be up all night, and Nigel sent me downstairs for some coffee to ask reception if we could have some strong coffee to keep us going. And as I went down to the reception, a conga burst out of the wedding reception and took me along with it. So I suddenly found myself in a conga that I couldn't get out of, knowing that Nigel was waiting for coffee upstairs.
Yeah, had I looked out of the window at that point, I would have seen Mary going through the car park in a conga.
I thought I wasn't.
I thought, really, yeah, she's not taking this very seriously.
Oh wow, how bizarre! How
But
bizarre!
Then we went back to the hospital. Nigel couldn't stay away, and we were both allowed to see Mike. And having just recently lost 2 parents, I looked into his eyes, and it looked like I was looking into the eyes of death. And it was so terrifying that actually I was holding Mike's hand. He reached out for me, which was wonderful, and he started putting a ring on my finger. And that got me absolutely going. But the thing is, as I was holding his hand, it was very, very hot. We'd been up all night. It was 20 to 5 in the morning, and I passed out holding his hand.
Unfortunately, she didn't actually let go of Mike's hand, so we had Mary falling down to the floor, dragging Mike out of his bed, who was connected to a heart bypass machine. So it was talk about stealing the show. It was
Suddenly Nigel found himself alone with Mike, because all the 7 doctors were world leading skilled surgeons were dragging me out on a plastic chair unconscious, and I actually came round in intensive care with oxygen, heart monitors and goodness knows what on me. Nigel turned to Mike and said, "Well, it's just you and me now, Mike." and then Nigel came out and took a photograph of me in intensive care and said, "You're never going to live this one down."
Goodness gracious me!
If it was
It's
a
unbelievable.
script, yeah,
It is a
be
script.
turned down for being too unbelievable.
I know,
isn't it?
and then they gave us permission. They said, "Look, Mike is going to have a heart transplant. There's no 2 ways about it." We'd only arrived up there with a pair of knickers each, really. So they said, "Look, there's nothing you can do now. Go home all the way to Herefordshire from Newcastle, pack up, and it'll take about a week to get Mike to the top of the heart transplant list." Luckily, he was quite lightweight, so that he could probably qualify for anybody's heart,
Right.
a child's heart or an adult's heart. And we drove home, got home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the phone went to say they'd got a heart, and could we go back?
What?
Oh, my
Yes,
goodness.
they had got a heart
within 5 hours.
within
or something.
5 hours.
5 hours.
That
Yeah.
is
Then-
extraordinary.
You must have been on your knees, and
Well,
then you had
what-
to turn around and drive all the way back.
I'm a risk manager, so I said,
Yeah.
right, we get up, we pack, and then we go to sleep. We get up at 7 and we go back.
Yeah.
And I drove because I'd left my glasses at home, and Nigel was exhausted, so I drove the second leg of journey, and we got there, and the phone went to say the heart had arrived, and there and then, could we get up to say goodbye to Mike?
And we had about 20 minutes with him
Yeah, if that.
before he went into
Yeah.
surgery. Yeah.
We were taken aside, and because he'd had a stroke, we were given a 70-30 chance of Mike pulling through.
Oh my goodness.
So you can
30% chance.
70% against it,
Oh, yeah.
30% for it. And you can imagine the day we went through. And also, I have to tell you, the day before Mike's transplant, my grandson had a 6-hour operation right in the middle of it to save his life. So the day before, I was pacing up and down, not knowing whether my grandson Ethan was going to live. And the next day, we had to do the same with each other, for Nigel, with his own son having a heart transplant at the age of 26 years old. So you can imagine what it did to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was one of the fastest they've ever done. Within 5 days of the stroke, he had a new heart. So absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and we're really pleased to say that it worked.
Yeah.
And Mike is still with us.
Well, he lived, so I had to propose then. I was on a. I had to carry out my side of the deal.
So what Nigel did was organise a spoof family Zoom conference to plan a family holiday, allegedly, so we could all recover from everything we'd been through.
Yeah.
And then you tell what you did.
I kind of set it all up on Zoom. I went down to the Indian takeaway to get a takeaway. Forgot to take my phone. The Indian takeaway was chaos. And I didn't come back, did I?
No. Nigel, basically, normally he pays for it. We've got a joint bank account. I know when it goes ping to put the plates in, and he will be home within 3 minutes. An hour later, Nigel hadn't come home. And I was ringing him. He'd left his phone at home. I rang the restaurant. They didn't pick up. And I went into meltdown. So I ran all the way to the Indian takeaway, hysterical, thinking something had happened to Nigel. And obviously it hadn't. But we couldn't eat because we got the Zoom conference. But I refused to go on it because I was crying my eyes out and was in no state. And Nigel knew he was going to ask me to marry him.
Oh no!
It wasn't going very well, was it?
So Nigel went and told everybody, and they thought it was hilarious. And so he said, look, they all know you're in a state. You know, mascara running down the face. Come on, talk to them. And during that conversation,
I proposed. So, and then
And
you
that was
burst
it.
into tears
I
yet
burst
again.
into tears.
My goodness, it's the most wonderful story. I mean, I've been in tears just listening to you,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, I don't know how you coped. And so that is my next question. How did you cope as a couple? What did all these health issues and terrible fears and anxiety, how did you cope?
Well, I thought it brought us together much closer. I mean, you need somebody you couldn't cope with that or either of those events on your own, I don't think. But together we did, didn't we?
We did. And we did. We held each other so much. We used to just stand and have a quiet time and just hug. And hugging is so important. And we used to talk into the small hours, and black humour as well kept us going. I'll never forget one of the nights when we were trying to sort of find hotels and things, and I managed to get us a hotel in the Stag and Hen centre of Newcastle, in a Stag and Hen hotel. And we were reeling from all that was happening, and we walked out of the lift to see a man dressed up as a life-size chicken. And it was just that kind of thing, that little moments like that kept us going as well.
Yes, I can imagine. The juxtaposition of what so awful in your life and then this bizarre event in front of you. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely weird. So tell us about the wedding.
Oh, the wedding was...
we kept it
amazing.
We kept it very small on purpose because, partly because of COVID, but also Mike, having just got out of hospital, was very vulnerable to...
He was shielding, basically.
Yeah, he was shielding. Yeah. So we kept it to a very small wedding, just close family.
Basically us and our children and my grandchildren.
Yeah, and it was a lovely house near where we live.
A manor house called Helen's Manor in Herefordshire. It was a absolutely perfect little place. My best friend who used to be a speech and language therapist, is a trained registrar, and she married us, and she was a huge Archers fan. And another close friend who is a huge Archers fan and a member of the group cooked us a wonderful Sunday roast. My son my eldest son gave me away. My daughter and son sang at the wedding. A friend from the group had written an Archers related poem all about how we'd met. And
we set up a Facebook group mainly for the Archers friends, called Our Wedding, and one of the things we were going to do was stream it live on Facebook for them, for that group. And one of the rules, if they were attending, was that they had to wear a hat and photograph it and post it onto the Facebook group.
Which they all did, and you can imagine a lot of the members of our group are elderly ladies and live alone, and they had Zoom meetings to plan their hats and what they were going to wear, so it brought them together. And also the group as well clubbed together and sent us a big present of Archers related gifts. Chili powder, flapjack,
tuna baked,
birds custard, you name it, everything. They'd had a meeting and they'd planned all that. So we had these amazing Archers presents.
Yes, they made bunting.
Oh yes, they made us bunting, which hangs in our kitchen to this day.
Each flag has something to do with the Archers on it. So,
yes.
Wonderful.
And didn't you receive some good luck messages as well?
Yes.
Am I right?
We had filmed, it suddenly popped up on our Facebook wedding stream. It was Nigel Pargeter. He'd come back from the dead. Goodness me. So, and then also Kenton, who I have met briefly once in a bar in Birmingham after some recording. He sent us photographs and good wishes and with good luck from everybody from the Bull. So that was absolutely lovely. And then we finished off the wedding and we told nobody about this. There was a lot of speculation as to what we'd go out to, and we danced out and back in to Barwick Green.
Oh, how wonderful! And didn't you also have a cake, an Archers themed cake as well?
We did. That was specially made with us on the green, wasn't it?
Yes, with "Welcome to Ambridge" on the front, and just the village green with me in my red coat and wellies that I'm synonymous with my flood work. And Nigel holding his tennis racket because he loves tennis, bang in the middle of the green in Ambridge. A bright green cake.
And somebody had also written a spoof script based on Our Wedding, wasn't it? So
as if it was the Archers.
Yeah, a lot of the members of the Archers were coming to our wedding. Yeah, I don't think you did actually, Lillian. So
I'm sorry about that, darling. I could have brought some gin, darlings, couldn't I, with me if I'd been. Sorry, I didn't get an invite.
I understand Linda Snell came and so did Brian.
Yeah.
Charming is all I can say.
It's such an extraordinary story, and everybody is now well. Your grandson Ethan is.
Oh yes, he's a wonderful, boisterous, fun-loving 3-year-old. Almost 2-year-old, but he may have to have another major operation at the end of when he's 3. But it all bodes well at the moment because he's just a bundle of fun. And
he's
Mike,
fantastic, and Mike is doing brilliantly as well. He probably took longer to get over the stroke than he did the heart transplant actually, but he eventually got home and just before our wedding, and he went back to work part-time initially, and now he's back full-time, so he works.
And he's been promoted, hasn't he?
He got promotion, so he's a plant scientist. So
gosh, this is a really wonderful
it's
story.
Wonderful, isn't it? And I think the thing that comes to my mind is the generosity of the donor or the donor's family, because we all need to think about carrying those cards and the difference that it makes to someone's life. You know, to think of somebody at the age of 26
Yeah.
needing a heart transplant.
Yeah, Michael is in touch with the donor family. And
He wrote to say thank you
Yeah,
from hospital.
Oh, how
Gosh.
wonderful.
and
How
it's he gets replies, and it's all very emotional.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
And on the anniversary of his transplant, he wrote to them, you know, because obviously it was a fantastic anniversary to get to for him, but for them it was going to be a hard time. So he wrote to them, and it's lovely actually that they're in touch, and they love the idea that their donor child actually, but that her heart is still beating.
Yes.
And I think that's something very special for them to get from that.
I can imagine that completely. That would be some sort of comfort for their loss, wouldn't it, actually? It seems to me, just talking to you, and because we met you before, there's such a lot of humour and joy about the pair of you. Would you say that's a kind of crucial cog in your relationship, humour?
It's the linchpin of our relationship. We're rude constantly, we laugh constantly, we're always up to hijinks with each other, trying to sort of get the better of each other with jokes.
Yeah, it's I obviously win in that.
Every time, dear, every time.
And Mary, what's the best thing about Nigel? Obviously not his hot cross buns.
No, I think the best thing about Nigel is the fact that he looks after me. As we've got the humour, but Nigel does look after me. I work incredibly hard with my work, and often I drive. I travel long distances. For instance, this afternoon I'm off to Cambridgeshire from Herefordshire to work, and then I'm on my feet all day with my floodmobile. And I'm absolutely exhausted, but Nigel drives me there and he drives me back, so I haven't got to do that. And he just literally supports me in my life, and he supports me with my profoundly disabled son. We haven't mentioned him very much, but during that awful week, he managed to get stung by, he attacked a wasp nest on the same week, and he was stung from top to bottom with a wasp nest. So there were 3 things in that week, even though Peter's was minor. Peter is very vulnerable young man, and he's lived in 3 different care establishments in the last year because people can't manage his challenging needs. And Nigel has helped me every step of the way with the transitions, with supporting him, and he helps me look after Peter. And when he comes home at weekends, it's terrifying sometimes having him. 6'3", quite violent, and he could break my neck at any second, and Nigel is there to support me through that. And having such a profoundly disabled child is awful. And to have Nigel to just sustain me when I literally can disintegrate with things that happen, I don't know how I'd cope without him. So his love and his humour and his support are the things that keep us just so much in love.
Oh, that is just wonderful, because of course you spent quite a few years on your own, didn't you, Mary, coping with your son and everything. So Nigel, what do you think is the best thing for you about Mary?
Choose your words carefully.
Well, as her carer, she's quite an incredible person actually. On her professional, when she's presenting to people, she is quite dynamic, quite strong, very forthright, and very good at that. You can kind of captivate an audience, can't you? But she's got an incredibly sensitive side as well. And yeah, I love that, and I love your humour, and I love our sort of banter and joking. But all the time. It's fun, and actually we support each other in everything we do, really, don't we? We have similar tastes in things as well, and we both cook. We both, obviously not hot cross buns, but
and we both listen to the Archers every night and discuss it every night. So we owe the Archers such a huge debt of thank you, because if it wasn't for the Archers, there'd be no us, and I can't imagine life without Nigel. So really, thank you to the Archers.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, because it is inspirational, and we wish you a very long and very happy marriage. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to our One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. If you'd like to see behind the scenes clips and bonus content, please visit our Facebook page, One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. And if you'd like to ask any questions, follow us on Twitter at One Stiletto 65. This podcast is produced by Raggedy House Productions and the music composed by Tom Smith. See you next time!